Billionaire asks the maid's daughter to play piano as a joke, but what happens next shocks everyone. A decade ago, a little girl named Lily Mayhew's hands held a secret that could shame a billionaire. Her mother, Clara Mayhew, cleaned the mansions of the wealthy so her 10-year-old daughter, Lily, could have a life she never did. But she never imagined her daughter's gift would become a rich man's cruel joke. Now, with her hands injured and a humiliating performance looming, Lily must choose. Will she let the Davenport family make her a laughingstock, or will she find the strength to reclaim the music that lives inside her? The audience at the Davenport Gala expected to be entertained by a novelty act, but they were about to witness a triumphant roar. Just before we dive in, if you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Now let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. A little girl's hands, far too small for the grand piano, held a secret that would shame a billionaire. The first light of dawn was a shy visitor in Clara's small apartment. It crept in softly, painting the worn floorboards in shades of gray and pale rose. It was a gentle light, a quiet start to another long day. Clara was already awake, moving through her small kitchen with practiced silence. Her every action was deliberate. The soft click of the kettle, the quiet scrape of a knife spreading butter on toast. These were the sounds of her life, a careful ballet performed so as not to wake the most important person in her world. Her daughter, Lily, was still asleep. Her straight blonde hair fanned out across her pillow like a halo of spun gold. Even in sleep, her small fingers sometimes twitched, as if playing silent melodies against the cheap cotton sheets. Clara's heart ached with a love so fierce it felt like a physical weight in her chest. Everything she did, every floor she scrubbed, every window she polished, was for this little girl. It was for the quiet promise sleeping in that tiny bedroom. On the wall hung a calendar from the local community center. A date was circled in bright red marker. Lily's recital. It was a small event, just a few students playing for their parents on a slightly out-of-tune upright piano. To Clara, it was more important than a concert at Carnegie Hall. Lily had been practicing a simple piece by Mozart. She played it with a focus that was startling in a child so young. Her teacher, a kind, elderly woman named Mrs. Gable, said Lily had a gift. "It's more than just practice, Clara," she'd said last week, her eyes shining. "She feels the music. That's something you can't teach." Clara allowed herself a small, tired smile at the memory. She packed a simple lunch for Lily and a thermos of coffee for herself. Then, she glanced at the clock. It was time. By 5:45 a.m., she was on a bus, watching her own neighborhood fade into the manicured perfection of the city's wealthiest district. Her destination was the Davenport estate, a place that felt more like a palace than a home. It sat on a hill overlooking the city, a monument of stone and glass. The iron gates were tall and imposing, designed to keep the world out. Clara slipped through a small, discreet service entrance at the side, her key card granting her access to a world she served but could never belong to. She changed in the staff locker room, a cramped, windowless space that smelled of bleach and floor polish. She traded her comfortable jeans for a stiff, gray uniform. The uniform was designed to make her invisible. It was a costume that announced her role, a silent, efficient presence who kept the machinery of a wealthy life running smoothly. "You're early, Clara," a voice grumbled. It was Martha, the head housekeeper. She was a woman built for hard work, with broad shoulders and hands that were never idle. She had been working for the Davenports for nearly 30 years. Her face was a roadmap of worry lines, but her eyes were kind. "Morning, Martha," Clara replied, her voice soft. "I wanted to get a start on the library. Mr. Davenport said he's having guests tonight." Martha snorted, a sound like gravel turning over. "Guests? That man always has guests. He collects people the way he collects art. Just something else to show off." She handed Clara a clipboard with a long list of tasks. "He wants the entire first floor to be spotless. Veronica is having friends over this afternoon, so her wing needs to be perfect, too. You know how she gets." Clara's stomach tightened at the mention of Veronica. She was Mr. Davenport's 16-year-old daughter. Veronica had her father's sharp eyes and a way of looking at the staff that made them feel like insects. She was known for her cruel remarks and for leaving deliberate messes, as if testing the limits of their service. The morning passed in a blur of cleaning. Clara worked with a quiet efficiency that Martha admired. She dusted priceless antiques and polished floors so reflective you could see your face in them. She moved through the vast, silent rooms like a ghost. The house was a museum of wealth. Sunlight streamed through two-story windows, illuminating paintings that belonged in galleries and furniture that cost more than Clara's car. It was a beautiful place, but it was not a home. It was cold, silent, and empty of laughter or warmth. Just before noon, as she was cleaning the grand music room, the silence was broken. Veronica Davenport swept in with two of her friends, their laughter sharp and loud in the quiet space. The music room was Mr. Davenport's pride and joy. At its center was a magnificent Steinway grand piano, its black lacquer polished to a mirror shine. "Oh, look, the help is still here," Veronica said, her voice dripping with disdain. She gestured vaguely at a perfectly clean side table. "You missed a spot. Right there." Clara murmured, "My apologies, Miss Davenport," and dutifully wiped the already gleaming surface. It was a game Veronica played often, a small way to exert her power. Veronica's friends giggled. One of them, a girl with a bored expression, ran a finger along the piano's lid. "Does anyone even play this thing, Ronnie?" "Daddy hires a professional for his parties sometimes," Veronica said, shrugging. "It's mostly just for show, like everything else in this house." She then turned her cold eyes back to Clara. "Can you even imagine someone like her knowing what to do with a piano like this?" The question hung in the air, thick with malice. Clara kept her face neutral, her eyes downcast. She would not give Veronica the satisfaction of a reaction. But inside, a quiet anger burned. She thought of Lily's small, determined hands on the keys of her worn-out practice keyboard at home. She thought of the pure, simple joy on her daughter's face when she finally mastered a difficult passage. Lily's music was worth more than all the money in this cold, empty house. It was real. As the girls left, their laughter echoing down the marble hall, Clara stood alone in the music room. She looked at the grand piano. It was a stunning instrument, a work of art. But it sat there silent, a beautiful object with no soul. She ran her own hand, chapped and rough from cleaning chemicals, over its smooth surface. For a brief, defiant moment, she imagined Lily sitting there. She imagined the room filled not with silence, but with the sweet, clear notes of Mozart. A fierce, protective love for her daughter swelled within her. One day, she vowed to herself, Lily would play on a piano just as grand as this one, and she would play for people who deserved to hear her. That afternoon, Clara received a call from Lily's school. She answered with a tremor of anxiety, her mind immediately jumping to the worst possibilities. "Mrs. Mayhew? This is Nurse Evans from the school." The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Lily had a little fall on the playground. She's perfectly fine, but she scraped her hands quite badly. She won't be able to play the piano for at least a week, and I know her recital is coming up." Clara's heart sank. Are they seriously hurt?" No, just scrapes and bruises. But they're tender, and she'll need to keep them bandaged. We thought it best she not take the bus home today. Could you come and pick her up?" Clara's mind raced. She couldn't just leave work. Mr. Davenport was famously intolerant of staff emergencies. She found Martha in the main kitchen, overseeing preparations for the evening's dinner party. Clara explained the situation in a low, hurried voice. Martha's expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, the poor dear. Just before her big day, too." She looked around the busy kitchen, then made a decision. "Go. I'll cover for you. I'll tell Mr. Davenport that one of the ovens was malfunctioning and I needed you to help me with it. He never sets foot in this kitchen anyway. He won't know the difference." "Martha, I can't ask you to do that," Clara whispered, overwhelmed by the kindness. "You're not asking. I'm telling," Martha said, pushing her gently towards the door. "Now hurry. Your little girl needs you." Clara arrived at the school to find Lily sitting on a bench in the nurse's office, her small face pale and her hands wrapped in clumsy white bandages. Tears welled in Lily's eyes the moment she saw her mother. "My recital, Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't play. It's ruined." Clara knelt and gathered her daughter into a fierce hug. "Oh, sweetheart, no? It's not ruined. Your hands will heal. We can talk to Mrs. Gable. The recital is just a little concert. Your health is what's important." But Lily shook her head, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "I practiced so hard." The bus ride home was quiet. Lily stared out the window, her bandaged hands resting carefully in her lap. The disappointment was a heavy cloud around her. For Lily, playing the piano wasn't just a hobby. It was her world. It was the place she felt most herself, most alive. The thought of not being able to play, even for a week, was devastating. When they got back to their apartment, Clara tried to lift her spirits. She made Lily her favorite dinner, macaroni and cheese, and let her watch an extra hour of television. But nothing seemed to work. Later that evening, Clara found Lily standing by her small electronic keyboard, staring at it with a look of profound sadness. She gently touched one of the keys with the tip of her bandaged finger, wincing slightly. "Does it hurt a lot?" Clara asked softly. Lily nodded, not looking up. "It feels stiff. And I keep thinking about the music. I can hear it in my head, but I can't make it come out." Clara's heart broke for her. She knew this pain was about more than just a missed recital. It was about a part of Lily's spirit being temporarily silenced. "The music will still be there when your hands are better," she promised, stroking her daughter's soft hair. "It's not going anywhere. It's inside you." The next day, Clara had to take Lily to work with her. She couldn't afford a babysitter, and Lily was too miserable to be left alone. She explained the situation to Martha, who, despite the risk, agreed to help. "We'll keep her in the staff lounge," Martha decided. "I'll bring her some books and puzzles. As long as Mr. Davenport and his high and mighty daughter don't see her, we should be fine." So Lily spent the day in the small, cluttered break room in the basement of the Davenport estate. It was a world away from the sunlit grandeur of the floors above. Clara checked on her whenever she could, bringing her snacks and making sure she was comfortable. But Lily was quiet and withdrawn. She spent most of the day staring into space, a little shadow of a girl lost in a palace of strangers. Late in the afternoon, disaster struck. Mr. Davenport was giving a tour of the estate to a group of potential business partners. His voice, loud and booming, echoed down the service corridor as he led them on an unscheduled visit to the wine cellar, which was located right next to the staff lounge. Clara, who was polishing silver in a nearby pantry, felt a jolt of panic. She rushed to the lounge, but it was too late. The door was slightly ajar, and Lily, curious about the noise, had peeked out just as the group was passing. Richard Davenport stopped dead in his tracks. His perfectly tailored suit and expensive cologne seemed to take up all the air in the narrow hallway. He was a man who was not used to surprises, especially not in the form of a small, blonde girl in the servants' quarters. "What is this?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing. His voice wasn't just angry, it was insulted, as if the very sight of a child in this part of his house was a personal offense. Clara stepped forward immediately, placing herself between Mr. Davenport and her daughter. "I am so sorry, sir. This is my daughter, Lily. She had an accident at school, and I had no one to watch her today. It won't happen again." Mr. Davenport's gaze flickered from Clara's apologetic face to Lily's wide, frightened eyes. He noticed the white bandages on her hands. A strange, cruel smile slowly spread across his face. It was not a smile of warmth or humor. It was the smile of a predator who had just found a new, interesting toy. "An accident, you say?" he said, his voice smooth as silk. He turned to his guests, who were watching the scene with a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. "Gentlemen, it seems we have a small problem with staff bringing their children to the workplace. However," he paused for dramatic effect, "perhaps we can turn this into a moment of entertainment." He looked back at Lily, his eyes glinting. "I'm having a charity gala here on Saturday night. A very important event. We have a string quartet, of course, but I think our guests would be amused by something a little more rustic." Clara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. She had no idea where this was going, but she knew it was somewhere terrible. Mr. Davenport crouched down, bringing himself closer to Lily's level. But there was nothing kind in the gesture. It was menacing. "I've heard from my daughter, Veronica, that you are something of a piano player." He glanced at Clara. "Is that right? Your daughter plays?" Clara hesitated. "She's just a beginner, sir. She's only 10. "Perfect." Mr. Davenport clapped his hands together, a sharp, loud sound that made Lily flinch. "Amateurish is exactly what we need. It will be charming. A little novelty act before the real musicians perform." He stood up, his smile widening. "It will be a wonderful joke. We'll tell everyone our maid's little girl is going to perform for us. The guests will love the irony." His business partners chuckled, some uncertainly, others with genuine amusement. The humiliation was a thick, choking cloud in the hallway. Clara felt her face burn with shame and rage. He was talking about her daughter as if she were a circus animal. "Sir, I don't think that's a good idea," Clara said, her voice shaking but firm. "As you can see, her hands are injured. She can't play." Mr. Davenport waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense. The gala is a few days away. The bandages will be off by then. It's settled." He looked down at Lily, his smile turning into a command. "You will play for us on Saturday night. A simple little song. Don't disappoint me." He then turned and swept his guests away towards the wine cellar, his booming laughter echoing behind him. "You see, gentlemen, even our staff is multi-talented." Clara was left standing in the hallway, her arm wrapped tightly around Lily's trembling shoulders. The cold, sterile corridor of the mansion had just become a stage for the cruelest kind of theater. Her daughter, her precious, gifted daughter, was now the punchline to a rich man's joke, and Clara had no idea how to protect her from it. The ride home was a heavy, suffocating silence. Clara drove her old, rattling car through streets lined with golden lamps, each one a world away from their own dimly lit neighborhood. She glanced at Lily in the passenger seat. Her daughter was small, huddled against the door, watching the city lights blur past. She hadn't said a word since they'd left the estate. Her face, usually so expressive, was a still, pale mask. Clara's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. A storm of fury and helplessness raged inside her, but she had to keep it contained. For Lily, when they finally reached their small apartment building, the silence followed them up the stairs and through the front door. The air inside, usually so comforting and safe, felt fragile, as if the cruelty from the mansion had seeped in with them. Clara went through the motions of their evening routine. She made a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches, but neither of them had much of an appetite. After dinner, Lily went to her room and sat on the edge of her bed. Clara stood in the doorway, watching her. Lily's bandaged hands lay in her lap like wounded birds. "Mommy." Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "That man, Mr. Davenport, does he hate us?" Clara's heart shattered. She walked over and sat beside her daughter, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "Oh no, sweetie. No, he doesn't hate us. People like him, they don't think about people like us at all. We're just part of the furniture. And sometimes, for fun, they like to see if the furniture can do a trick." The explanation sounded as ugly to her own ears as it must have to Lily's. "But why my piano?" Lily asked, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Playing the piano is my favorite thing in the whole world." He made it sound ugly, like a joke. "Because your piano is beautiful," Clara said, her voice fierce with conviction. "And some people can't stand to see something beautiful without trying to own it or break it." She held Lily tighter. "He will not break this. I promise you." Later that night, long after Lily had fallen into a restless sleep, Clara sat at her small kitchen table. The unpaid bills were stacked neatly in a corner, a constant, quiet reminder of how precarious their life was. Mr. Davenport's command was not a request. It was an order wrapped in the guise of an opportunity. If she refused, she would be fired. There was no doubt in her mind. A woman with a sick child, a maid who dared to say no to the master of the house. She would be dismissed for insubordination and finding another job that paid as well, that was on a bus line, that allowed her the flexibility she needed for Lily. It would be nearly impossible. They would lose the apartment. They would lose the fragile stability she had worked so hard to build. And Lily's piano lessons, the one luxury Clara insisted upon, would be the first thing to go. The weight of it all pressed down on her. She felt trapped. Damned if she did, and damned if she didn't. To subject Lily to that humiliation, to make her perform like a pet for these cold, cruel people, felt like a betrayal of her daughter's spirit. But to refuse and plunge them into poverty felt like a betrayal of her duty as a mother. She rested her head in her hands, the exhaustion of the day, of her life, washing over her. For the first time in a long time, Clara felt truly, utterly alone. The next morning, Clara dropped Lily off at school, her little face still shadowed with worry. At the estate, the atmosphere was tense. Preparations for the gala were in full swing. Florists were arranging massive bouquets of flowers that cost more than Clara's monthly rent. Caterers were bustling in and out of the kitchen. The entire house was being polished and perfected for the grand event. Clara found Martha in the linen closet, counting napkins. She closed the door softly behind her. "Martha, I need to talk to you." In a low, hurried voice, Clara recounted the scene in the service hallway, Mr. Davenport's cruel pronouncement, the joke he wanted to play on his wealthy guests. Martha's face, already etched with a lifetime of disapproval for her employer, hardened into a mask of cold fury. She slammed the stack of napkins down on a shelf. "That man," she hissed, her voice a low growl. "That man has a piece of ice where his heart should be. I have seen him do some terrible things in 30 years, Clara, but this, to use a child, to mock her talent for sport, this is a new low, even for him." "What do I do, Martha?" Clara asked, her voice pleading. "If I say no, he'll fire me. I can't lose this job." Martha sighed, the anger in her eyes softening to weary resignation. She had seen dozens of employees come and go, many fired for far less. "I know, child. I know. He has you in a corner." She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. He did something like this once before, years ago. There was a young man working on the grounds, a gardener. He was a gifted singer, used to sing in his church choir. Mrs. Davenport, the first one, before she left him, she heard him one day and told Richard how beautiful his voice was. Martha leaned closer, her voice dropping lower. So, for his birthday party, Richard invited the boy to sing. Told him it was his big break. The boy practiced for weeks. He got up on that stage in his Sunday best, in front of all those rich folks in their jewels. And just as he was about to start, Richard tapped a glass for silence and announced, "And now, for a bit of rustic charm, the yard boy will sing us a little song." He laughed while he said it. The guests tittered. The boy, "I never saw a person look so small." He sang, but his voice shook the whole time. He quit the next day. Richard thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Clara felt sick. So there's no way out. With Richard Davenport, the only way out is through, Martha said grimly. You have to play his game. But, she added, her eyes meeting Clara's, that doesn't mean you have to play by his rules. Before Clara could ask what she meant, the door swung open. Veronica Davenport stood there, a malicious smirk on her face. She had clearly been listening. "Talking about me and my father?" she asked, her voice sickly sweet. "Don't worry. I already know everything." She sauntered into the small closet, crowding the space. She looked Clara up and down with open contempt. "So, your little prodigy is going to be the main event. I am so excited. I've told all my friends to watch. We're making bets on whether she'll cry before or after she plays." "That's enough, Veronica," Martha said, her voice sharp as a knife. Veronica ignored her, her eyes fixed on Clara. "I stopped by the music room earlier. Daddy had the piano tuned especially for the party. It's a pity the first person to play on it will be, well, you know." She let out a high, artificial laugh. "Just make sure her dress isn't covered in dust from that little shack you live in. We have an image to maintain, after all." With a final, withering glance, Veronica turned and flounced out of the closet, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and pure venom behind her. Clara stood trembling, the insult landing like a physical blow. That evening, the bandages came off Lily's hands. The skin was still pink and tender, crisscrossed with faint white lines where the deepest scrapes had been. She sat at her keyboard, her small shoulders slumped. "It's in 2 days, Mommy," she said quietly. "What am I going to play?" "What about your Mozart piece?" Clara suggested gently. "The one for the recital." Lily shook her head. "That piece is from my heart. I don't want to give it to them. It feels like letting them spoil it." Clara understood completely. That piece was full of joy and light. To play it in that cold house, for those cold people, would be a violation. Lily tried to play a few simple scales, but her fingers were stiff and clumsy. The frustration brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I can't do it," she cried, pulling her hands away from the keys. "It hurts, and I keep making mistakes. They're all going to laugh at me." Clara pulled her daughter away from the keyboard and onto her lap, rocking her gently. "It's okay to be scared, sweetie. And it's okay if it hurts." She looked at her daughter's determined, tear-stained face. An idea, sparked by Martha's words, began to form in her mind. A dangerous, terrifying, and possibly brilliant idea. The next day, a new figure appeared at the Davenport estate. He was a younger man, with a quiet demeanor and kind eyes that seemed out of place in the stern, imposing mansion. Clara saw him in the library, looking at the books with a thoughtful expression. He was dressed simply, in a tweed jacket that was slightly frayed at the cuffs. He did not carry himself with the same arrogance as Mr. Davenport. Later, Martha informed her that it was Arthur Davenport, Mr. Davenport's younger brother. "He's the good one," Martha whispered. "An English professor at some university upstate. They're night and day, those two. Arthur has a soul." Clara witnessed the truth of this later that day. She was serving tea in the grand sitting room, where Richard was loudly telling his brother about the gala. "And you'll love this, Arthur. It's my masterstroke." Richard boomed, laughing. "For a bit of pre-show entertainment, I'm having one of the maid's daughters play the piano. Can you imagine? The little thing looks terrified. It's going to be absolutely hilarious." Clara, her hands steady despite the rage boiling inside her, kept pouring the tea. She didn't dare look up, but she could feel Arthur's eyes on her. She saw his hand tighten around his teacup. "Richard, that sounds needlessly cruel," Arthur said, his voice quiet but firm. "She's a child, not a court jester." "Oh, don't be so sensitive," Richard scoffed. "It's a bit of fun. It teaches them their place. Besides, it gives the girl a chance to be in the same room with her betters. She should be grateful." Arthur said nothing more, but the look of profound disgust on his face spoke volumes. As Clara was leaving the room, he caught her eye for a brief moment. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a promise of rescue. It was a simple acknowledgement of her humanity, a quiet message that said, "I see you. This is wrong." That small gesture, that one moment of kindness in a house so devoid of it, was all Clara needed. It was like a single match struck in a dark room. The path forward was suddenly clear. That night, she sat with Lily on the living room floor. She had made a decision. They would not be victims. They would not be a joke. "Lily," she said, taking her daughter's hands, now free of their bandages. "I have an idea. It's a little scary, but I think it's the right thing to do." She paused, looking directly into her daughter's blue eyes. "Mr. Davenport is expecting you to play something simple, something a beginner would play. He wants you to be unremarkable. He wants people to smile politely and feel sorry for the poor little maid's daughter." Lily nodded, understanding. "But what if," Clara continued, her voice gaining strength, "you didn't play what he expects? What if you played something he could never even imagine?" She told Lily about a piece of music she'd overheard her practicing with Mrs. Gable a few weeks ago. It was a piece Lily had found herself in an old music book. It was not simple. It was a haunting, powerful nocturne by Chopin. It was complex and full of deep, adult emotion. Lily had been drawn to it, practicing it in secret, believing it was too advanced for her recital. "That one," Lily whispered, her eyes wide. "But it's so hard. And my hands." "We will practice," Clara said with a newfound resolve. "We will spend all of tomorrow practicing. Not for them, Lily. Not for Mr. Davenport or his cruel daughter or his laughing guests. We will do this for us. We will do it for Mrs. Gable and for the music itself." She saw a flicker of the old fire return to her daughter's eyes. The fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it, defiance. "He wants a joke?" Clara said, her voice a low, determined whisper. "Fine. We'll give him one. The joke will be on him. They are expecting a mouse, Lily. We are going to give them a lion." Lily looked down at her small, tender hands, then back at her mother's resolute face. For the first time in days, a real smile touched her lips. It was a small, fragile smile, but it was a start. "Okay, Mommy," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Let's give them a lion." The final 24 hours before the gala passed in a strange, dreamlike state. The world outside their small apartment seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them and the 88 keys of the electronic keyboard. Clara had called Lily's school and reported her sick. She took the day off from the estate, telling Martha she had a migraine, an excuse Martha readily accepted with a knowing. "You rest up, dear. You've got a big night ahead of you." Their apartment became a sanctuary, a rehearsal space, a war room. They practiced for hours. Clara would sit on the floor beside the keyboard, her hand resting on Lily's back, feeling the small muscles tense and relax with the effort. Lily's hands, still tender, moved over the keys with a new and ferocious purpose. At first, the notes were hesitant. The complex chords of the Chopin nocturne were a challenge, and her sore fingers protested. There were moments of frustration, moments when tears threatened to spill. I can't, Lily said, her voice choked with frustration after a particularly clumsy passage. It's too fast here. My fingers won't listen. Then let's slow it down, Clara said calmly, her own heart pounding with anxiety. She had to be the rock. Breathe, sweetie. Don't think about the notes. Think about the story. What is the music saying? They talked about the piece not as a technical exercise, but as a tale of sadness giving way to strength. This part, Clara would say, pointing to a dark, sorrowful section, this is how we felt in that hallway. Small and scared. Then she'd move her finger to a passage where the melody began to soar. And this part, this is our secret. This is the lion. You have to let it roar, Lily. Slowly, painstakingly, the music began to take shape. The notes became more confident. The hesitant little girl at the keyboard was replaced by a young artist, channeling a deep well of emotion into the music. Clara watched, mesmerized. This was more than a recital piece. This was her daughter's soul becoming audible. In the late afternoon, a new panic set in. Clara looked at the simple, well-worn clothes in Lily's closet and felt a fresh wave of despair. What would Lily wear? Veronica's cruel words about their rags echoed in her mind. They couldn't afford a new dress, not even a cheap one. The thought of Lily walking onto that stage in her school clothes, giving the mocking audience yet another reason to pity her, was unbearable. Just as desperation was about to set in, there was a knock at the door. It was Martha. She held a large, flat box in her hands. Her face was set in its usual grim lines, but her eyes were soft. I figured you might be in a bind, she said, stepping inside and placing the box on the table. Don't you say a word about refusing it. Just open it. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a simple, beautiful dress of dark blue velvet. It was secondhand, but it was in perfect condition. It had long sleeves and a small, white lace collar. It was elegant, dignified, and timeless. It belonged to Arthur's daughter, from his first marriage, Martha explained quietly. She left it behind years ago when she went off to college. I was supposed to donate it, but I never got around to it. I had a feeling it was waiting for someone special. I took the hem up this morning. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She was so unaccustomed to kindness, it felt overwhelming. Martha, I don't know how to thank you. You can thank me by having that little girl of yours play her heart out tonight, Martha said, patting Clara's arm. Show them what real class looks like. It has nothing to do with money. When Lily tried on the dress, it was a perfect fit. She looked in the small, cracked mirror in their hallway and slowly turned. She didn't look like a maid's daughter anymore. She looked like the musician she was. The dress was like a suit of armor. Their arrival at the Davenport estate that evening was a study in contrasts. At the front of the mansion, a line of luxury cars deposited guests in tuxedos and glittering gowns onto a red carpet. Laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses drifted on the cool night air. Clara and Lily entered through the cold, concrete service tunnel in the back. The sounds of the party were muffled down here, replaced by the clatter of dishes and the shouted orders of the catering staff. They were shown to a small, windowless storage room to wait. It was filled with boxes of cleaning supplies and smelled faintly of ammonia. A single folding chair had been placed in the corner for Lily. It was a calculated insult, a clear message of their status. Clara's rage simmered just beneath the surface, but she focused on Lily, keeping her face calm and reassuring. Think of it as our secret hideout, she whispered, helping Lily smooth out the velvet dress. We can hear everything from here, but they can't see us. We have the advantage. A few minutes later, the door opened a crack. It was Arthur Davenport. He looked deeply uncomfortable. I am so sorry about this, he said in a low voice, his eyes full of apology. My brother's sense of theater is appalling. I just wanted to come and say, I will be in the front row, and I will be listening. He looked at Lily, his expression kind. No matter what happens, you are very brave. Don't ever forget that. He slipped away as quietly as he came, leaving behind a small measure of warmth in the cold little room. Finally, the moment arrived. A staff member came to fetch them. They walked through a labyrinth of service corridors and emerged into the wings of a small, temporary stage that had been set up in the grand ballroom. Through the heavy curtain, Clara could see the audience. Hundreds of wealthy faces, gleaming with jewels and self-satisfaction. The string quartet had just finished, and the applause was polite, subdued. Then, Richard Davenport walked to the center of the stage, a smug smile plastered on his face. He tapped his champagne glass with a spoon, and a hush fell over the room. "Thank you. Thank you," he began, his voice booming with false charm. "It is wonderful to see so many generous faces here tonight, all in support of a wonderful cause." He spoke for a few minutes about the charity, his words smooth and practiced. Then, his smile widened. "And now," he said, leaning into the microphone, "before our main musical event, we have a little palate cleanser. A moment of charming, homespun entertainment. At Davenport Enterprises, we believe in nurturing talent at all levels." He paused, letting the suspense build. "Tonight, we are giving a very special opportunity to the daughter of one of our own household staff. She's only 10 years old, and she's going to play a charming little tune for us. Please give a polite welcome to little Lily Mayhew." A smattering of polite, slightly confused applause rippled through the room. Clara could hear whispers. "The maid's daughter? Is he serious?" Veronica, sitting in the front row with her friends, was giggling behind her hand, her eyes shining with cruel anticipation. Clara knelt in front of Lily in the darkness of the wings. "It's time," she whispered. "Don't look at their faces. Look at the keys. Find your story. Find the lion." Lily nodded, her small face pale but resolute. She took a deep breath and walked out onto the stage. The spotlight found her, and a collective murmur went through the crowd. She looked so small, so fragile in her simple velvet dress, walking towards the enormous, gleaming Steinway. She looked like a doll, a novelty. She reached the piano, adjusted the bench, and sat. For a moment, she just sat there, her small, unbandaged hands resting in her lap. The room was silent, save for a few coughs and the clink of ice in a glass. The audience was waiting for the joke to begin. Lily placed her hands on the keys. Her eyes found Arthur's in the front row. He gave her that same small, encouraging nod. Then her gaze drifted past him to a service door at the back of the room, where she could just make out the silhouette of her mother, watching. She began to play. The first few notes of the Chopin Nocturne were exactly what the audience expected. They were soft, hesitant, almost fragile. A simple, melancholic melody. Polite, indulgent smiles appeared on the faces in the audience. They settled back in their chairs, prepared to endure the amateur performance for a few minutes before the real professionals came on. Mr. Davenport stood at the side of the stage, a broad, self-satisfied smirk on his face. This was going exactly as he'd planned. It was perfect, pathetic. But then, something shifted. After the first 8 bars, the left hand entered. It wasn't the simple accompaniment of a beginner. It was a deep, resonant countermelody, played with a confidence and emotional weight that was utterly shocking. The simple tune transformed into something dark, complex, and powerful. The polite smiles in the audience vanished. The whispers stopped. A man in the second row who had been checking his watch looked up, his eyes wide. Veronica's giggle died in her throat. Her smirk was frozen on her face, slowly melting into disbelief. Lily's entire posture at the piano had changed. She was no longer a frightened little girl. She was in command of the instrument, her body swaying with the music, her eyes closed in concentration. Her small hands, which had seemed so tender and weak, moved across the keyboard with breathtaking precision and speed. The music swelled, filling the grand ballroom with a sound it had never known before. It was not the cold, perfect music of hired professionals. This was music that was alive. It was filled with longing, with pain, with a defiant, soaring hope. It was the sound of a lion's roar. Mr. Davenport's smirk had completely disappeared. He stood, rigid, by the stage, his face a mask of utter confusion. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't the joke. The little girl was not playing a charming little tune. She was playing great music, and she was playing it brilliantly. The joke was somehow, impossibly, turning back on him. The music reached its emotional climax. A cascade of furious, passionate notes that seemed far too big to come from such a small person. The guests were leaning forward in their seats, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some had tears in their eyes. They weren't just hearing a performance. They were witnessing a revelation. They were seeing the invisible made visible, hearing the silenced given a voice. The final passage of the nocturne was quiet, returning to the opening theme, but it was no longer fragile. It was resolute, hopeful. The last note hung in the air, a single, perfect star in the vast silence. For a full 5 seconds after the music ended, the room was absolutely still. No one moved. No one breathed. The silence was more profound than any applause. Then, Arthur Davenport rose to his feet and began to clap. His applause was loud and deliberate in the silent room. A woman next to him, a stern-looking woman with an air of great authority, stood up and joined him. Then another and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet, erupting in a thunderous, overwhelming wave of applause. It was not polite. It was a roar. Lily sat at the piano, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes wide with shock at the sound washing over her. She looked from the sea of unknown, cheering faces to her mother, who was now walking towards her from the wings, her own face wet with tears. Mr. Davenport was frozen in place, his face pale with shock and a dawning, sickening horror. He had tried to stage a public humiliation, and instead, he had orchestrated a triumph. He was the fool. He was the joke. The stern-looking woman from the front row strode purposefully towards the stage. The applause quieted as people realized she was about to speak. She was Beatrice Du Bois, the legendary and famously severe director of the National Music Academy. Getting a nod from her was the dream of every aspiring musician in the country. She stopped at the edge of the stage and looked past Richard Davenport, as if he were a piece of furniture. Her eyes were fixed on Lily. "Young lady," she said, her powerful voice cutting through the room. "What is your name?" "Lily Mayhew, ma'am," Lily whispered, still overwhelmed. "Well, Lily Mayhew," Ms. Du Bois announced, her voice ringing with authority. "That was not merely a performance. That was an exorcism. I have not heard Chopin played with that level of emotional honesty by a musician 3 times your age." She then turned her steely gaze upon Richard Davenport. "Richard," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "You invited me here tonight promising a surprise. You told me there would be a performance of rare and special talent." She paused, letting the entire room hang on her next words. "You vastly understated the matter. But tell me, why is a prodigy of this caliber not already enrolled in my academy? And why is her mother, who is clearly a remarkable woman, forced to serve UT instead of managing her daughter's brilliant career?" The public humiliation was absolute. Richard Davenport's face turned a shade of mottled red. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was exposed, his cruelty laid bare for all his wealthy friends to see. The joke was complete, and it was, just as Clara had planned, entirely on him. Chaos erupted in the wake of Ms. Du Bois's pronouncement. The carefully curated atmosphere of polite wealth shattered. The guests, who moments before had been a unified, complacent audience, were now a buzzing swarm of individuals. They crowded towards the stage, their faces a mixture of excitement and shock. The joke Mr. Davenport had planned was indeed a success, just not in the way he'd intended. The story of the night wasn't his generosity. It was his spectacular, public misjudgment. Clara reached the piano and wrapped her arms around Lily, who was trembling, overwhelmed by the noise and the sudden rush of attention. Lily buried her face in her mother's side, the velvet of the dress a familiar comfort. "Let's get you out of here," Clara whispered, her voice a fierce, protective shield against the noise. Just as they turned to leave the stage, Mr. Davenport blocked their path. His face was a ghastly white, and a desperate, false smile was stretched across his lips. He was in damage control mode, his mind racing to spin the disaster into a win. "Incredible," he boomed, gesturing towards Lily as if she were a prize he had just unveiled. "As I was saying, we believe in nurturing talent here. I discovered this little gem myself. I knew she had it in her all along." The lie was so audacious, so shameless, that it silenced the people closest to the stage. Clara looked him dead in the eye. All the fear she had ever felt in his presence was gone, burned away by the fire of Lily's performance. "You didn't discover her, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice low and steady, yet it carried with an undeniable authority. "You don't see people, you only see objects. You saw my daughter as a novelty, a toy for your party." She pulled Lily closer. "You didn't provide an opportunity. You just provided a stage for your own cruelty. My daughter did the rest." Without another word, she turned her back on him. Arthur appeared at her side, his face etched with a mixture of shame for his brother and pride for what he had just witnessed. Martha was right behind him, her arms crossed. glaring at her employer with 30 years of pent-up indignation. "This way," Arthur said, guiding them towards a side exit. "Before the reporters get to you." They moved through the stunned crowd, who parted to let them pass. Clara caught a glimpse of Veronica. She was standing frozen near the front row, her friends having taken a noticeable step away from her. Her face was a storm of humiliation and fury. For the first time, she looked as small and powerless as she had tried to make Lily feel. Arthur led them down a quiet, carpeted hallway, far from the noise of the ballroom. "My car is out back," he said. "Let me drive you home. You shouldn't have to take the bus tonight." The ride home in Arthur's warm, quiet car was the complete opposite of their journey to the estate. Lily had finally let her tears come, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of release. She lay her head in Clara's lap, her small body exhausted from the emotional ordeal. Clara stroked her hair, murmuring soft words of comfort, her own heart overflowing with a fierce, trembling joy. She looked out the window at the passing city lights, and for the first time, they didn't feel a world away. They felt like they were full of promise. The next morning, their world had changed. The story was everywhere. The city's major newspaper had a picture of Lily at the piano on its front page, her face a mask of intense concentration. The headline read, "The Maid, the Mogul, and the Masterpiece. How a 10-year-old's performance exposed the heartless core of high society." The story had gone viral online. Videos of the performance, shaky and shot on guests' phones, had millions of views. The comments section was a tidal wave of support for Lily and condemnation for Richard Davenport. He was no longer a respected philanthropist. He was a villain in a real-life fairy tale. His company's stock took a noticeable dip in the morning's trading. Donors to his charity began to quietly withdraw their support. The joke had cost him far more than he could ever have imagined. Clara's phone rang incessantly. News stations, talk shows, music bloggers, everyone wanted to talk to the mother of the piano prodigy in the palace. Clara ignored them all. There was only one call she was waiting for, and it came late that morning. Mrs. Mayhew, the crisp, authoritative voice of Beatrice Du Bois, said on the other end of the line, "I trust you and your daughter are recovering from last night's excitement." "I meant every word I said. I would like to offer Lily a full scholarship to the National Music Academy's youth program. The scholarship will cover all tuition, private instruction, and materials. Furthermore, the Academy has discretionary funds to assist with housing for families of exceptional students. We would be honored to have Lily, and you, join our community." Clara sat down on her worn sofa, the phone pressed to her ear, and wept. 2 days later, Clara walked back into the Davenport estate. But this time, she did not use the service entrance. She walked up the main stone pathway, through the grand front doors, which were opened for her by a stunned-looking butler. She was not wearing her gray uniform. She was wearing her own simple, clean clothes. The house was eerily quiet. The flowers from the gala were wilting in their vases. The place felt like a tomb. She was there to collect her final paycheck and the few personal items she kept in her locker. She found Martha in the main kitchen. The older woman enveloped her in a hug that smelled of cinnamon and quiet strength. "I handed in my notice this morning," Martha said, her voice even. 30 years is long enough. After what I saw the other night, I can't be a part of it anymore. Arthur is helping me find a new position, managing a historic guest house upstate. A place with some dignity." "Oh, Martha," Clara said, her heart aching for the loss of her friend but happy for her escape. "I'm so glad." "This is for you," Martha said, handing her a box with her things, along with a thick envelope. "Your final pay, and a little extra something the staff all chipped in. For the little lion." As Clara was about to leave, Mr. Davenport appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. He looked haggard. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, weary look. "Mayhew," he said, his voice hoarse. "Wait. We can discuss a raise. A new position. You could be my daughter's personal assistant. A direct line to me." Clara looked at the man who had, in his own strange way, set them free. She felt no anger, no hatred, only a vast, empty pity. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice polite but firm. "But my daughter and I are moving on. We won't be needing anything from you." She walked out of the kitchen, down the grand marble hallway, and out the front door into the sunlight, leaving the dark, cold mansion and its lonely master behind for good. The National Music Academy was everything the Davenport estate was not. It was old, but it was vibrant and full of life. The scent of lemon polish and old wood filled the air. The sound of music drifted from every room. A violin scale here, a soaring soprano voice there. It was a place built on love for art, not on the display of wealth. Ms. Du Bois met them in her office, a warm, book-lined room overlooking a green courtyard. She was just as stern as she had seemed at the gala, but there was a deep kindness in her eyes. She explained the program to them, the world-class instructors Lily would have, the other gifted children she would learn alongside. They had found a small, sunlit apartment just a few blocks from the academy, paid for by the housing fund. For the first time, Clara could walk Lily to her lessons instead of putting her on a bus. For the first time, she had a life that was not defined by scrubbing other people's floors. She enrolled in a community college course to finish the business degree she had abandoned years ago. Lily thrived. The academy was her true home. She was no longer a novelty or a secret. She was a musician among musicians. Her friendship with other students, children who understood her passion, was a joyous discovery. The shadow of the Davenport Gala faded, replaced by the bright, challenging work of becoming the artist she was always meant to be. 1 year later, Lily was preparing for the Academy's annual spring showcase. It was her first major solo performance since that fateful night. She was to play the centerpiece of the program. Clara stood in the wings of the beautiful, historic concert hall, watching her daughter warm up at the piano. Lily was wearing a new dress, one they had picked out together, in a shade of brilliant, hopeful blue. She looked taller, more confident. The last year had been a time of incredible growth for them both. An usher brought Clara a letter that had been left for her at the box office. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for a staggering amount, made out to the National Music Academy Scholarship Fund. Tucked in with the check was a simple, typed note. It read, "For the next lion." Clara stared at the note, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. She would never know for sure if it was from a guilt-ridden Richard Davenport or the kind-hearted Arthur, but it didn't matter. The money was not an apology she needed, but it was a promise that another child, somewhere, would get a chance they might not have had. The house lights dimmed. It was time. Lily walked onto the stage to warm, genuine applause. She sat at the piano, her posture poised and professional. Before she began, she looked into the wings and caught her mother's eye. She smiled, a radiant, joyful smile that held no memory of the fear she had once felt on a stage like this. Clara's heart was so full she thought it might burst. The promise she had made to herself in that cold, empty music room so long ago had come true. Lily was playing on a grand piano, for people who deserved to hear her. Lily began to play. The music that filled the hall was not the defiant roar of Chopin's Nocturne. It was a new piece, something lighter, more complex, full of a hope so bright it felt like sunshine. It was the sound of a future being written, a future they had claimed for themselves. It was the sound of a promise kept, and a life, once small and silent, now filled with magnificent, unapologetic music. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive stories.
If you believe that true heroism lies in the everyday acts of dignity and perseverance, then you belong here. Subscribe to Unsung Heroes. Join our community to celebrate the resilience and worth of every individual and ensure their quiet sacrifices never go unnoticed. Like and share. Help us amplify these unfiltered, authentic stories by liking this video and sharing it with someone who needs to be reminded of the silent power of the human spirit. Be a witness. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a powerful look at life's challenges and triumphs across the American social landscape. Subscribe today and honor the silent power of the human spirit.